Welcome to NAP Week 2024, sponsored by Belong Villages. My name is Hilary Woodhead. I am the Executive Director of the National Activity Providers Association, and I am delighted to launch National Activity Providers and Professionals Week. This week is a celebration dedicated to activity providers who commit to enriching lives, and it aligns seamlessly with our overarching theme of the year of belonging. A theme that emphasises our commitment to creating inclusive communities and creating meaningful connections. Before we explore the theme of today's celebration, I have two significant announcements to make. Firstly, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to our main sponsor, Belong, whose generous support has made this week possible. Their commitment has allowed us to bring you a week filled with events, resources and webinars to support your well-being and inform your practice in 2024. Additionally, I'd like to express our appreciation to our celebration sponsor, Majestic Air Luxury Care Homes, whose support has enabled us to invite a special guest, a motivational speaker and author, Big Ian, who will conclude our week on Friday afternoon. As we navigate through the diverse events that are planned for this week, including low and no cost activities, please visit the NAP Week page on the NAPA website and our Eventbrite page to explore and register for these exciting events. Now on to the second thrilling announcement of today's agenda. I am delighted to announce the successful recipients of our Living the Dream Fund. In the autumn of 2023, we launched this initiative to support older people to defy ageist stereotypes and fulfill their ambitions and dreams. Today, I am thrilled to announce that the successful recipients of the NAPA Living the Dream Fund are, if only I had a drum roll at this point, I'd be able to, you can hear it in the background, I hope. They are Leslie Ficini and Olive Thomas from New Drumoo Care Home in Wales. They will be fulfilling Olive's dream to attend a day at the races and relive some cherished memories. The second recipients are Amy Robinson and Molly Hubbard from Homely Care Home in Navenbury. They will be publishing a children's short story based on childhood memories of the Second World War. Hannah Reid and Betty Fish from Woodcroft Care Home will be organising an animal encounter experience, particularly focusing on Betty's love for animals at Folly Farm. And finally, Sue Eggersdorf and Bill Wall at Belong Chester will be bringing Bill's passion for Triumph motorcycles to life by arranging a special bike party and showcasing his vintage Triumph bike. These remarkable individuals and organisations have shown unwavering dedication to turning dreams into reality and making a lasting difference. Thank you to everybody who applied to the Living the Dream Fund, and we look forward to receiving more nominations for our next round in the spring. Now we move on to the heart of today's event. I'm honoured to introduce an esteemed guest, Sue Ascott. Sue is a learning and development specialist and a dedicated NAPA trustee, whose experience and expertise have played a pivotal role in shaping NAPA's work. Today, Sue will shed light on a theme fundamental to NAPA's mission, the importance of professional development for activity providers. Hi, Sue, how are you?
I'm very well, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you for that introduction, Hilary, but I'm thrilled to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. So just to start us off, Sue, would you just share your thoughts on why CPD is so important for APs?
Yes, absolutely. And I thought it would be useful to start with my definition of professional development. And we put the word continuing in front of professional development because it is exactly that. We all, and particularly in the activity provision, we need to continuously professionally develop our practice. And for me, it's about gaining new learning experience, new knowledge, and gaining new ideas. But it's also about being brave enough to recognise perhaps where we have a few gaps and a few weaker areas, and to think about how we can develop in those areas. And it's so important for the people we support because actually we need to move forward year on year, month on month. And that's can be done through building on not only our strengths, but our weaker areas. And when we work in social care, wherever we work, many of us do get our job satisfaction from supporting the people living in those settings or visiting those settings. But I think it's really important, and my passion comes from also thinking about professional development as a way to give job satisfaction to each and every one of us. The enjoyment we get from our job starts with developing professionally, and I think that's why it's so important to me.
Thank you. That's lovely. And I think what I really like about what you said about our weaker areas, that actually there's something to embrace. I think
Absolutely.
quite often we worry about covering those up, don't we? Putting them so that people don't see that we've got areas for development. But actually, it's really important, isn't it, to kind of to embrace those areas, because that brings with it a whole range of opportunities and new ways of looking at things. So yeah,
does.
I think, yeah. Yeah.
And it also
really
removes fear and helps us to build confidence, because often in trying to cover up areas where we're a bit weaker, we can lose confidence. And I think embracing those gaps in our knowledge or our skills gives us confidence to actually move forward and learn more.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. So thinking about your own experience, your own career, do you have kind of a pivotal moment where professional development impacted on your approach or your perspective,
I
and perhaps
do.
made a difference to your own practice?
I do. And I was reflecting on this, obviously, whilst I was preparing to talk to everybody today. And I've got a very clear example of the second time I worked in an organisation that went through change. Because the first time my organisation went through significant change, it was an acquisition. And actually, I just hung on, and I did cling on, and I survived. But the second time I was working in an organisation that was going through significant change, I knew I needed to be better prepared as an individual. I needed to make sure that I was ready to embrace that change and be confident. And so for me, professional development became very important in terms of adding something to my internal CV as well as my external CV by way of new learning every year. Whether that was a qualification, there are many free certificates, but there are other recognised qualifications. And doing something every year became a personal challenge for me in order to be ready. And that served me very, very well throughout my career. So I think reflecting on that really was quite interesting from my point of view. And I do firmly believe, even as I've gone through the later stages of my career, I still try and do that to keep relevant and keep learning.
And I think when you've been through a change at work, a big change like a restructure or a merger or acquisition or whatever it might be, it can be quite bruising, can't it? But if there are things you can learn from during that process about yourself and about how to manage that situation, that is going to impact on the way that you practice, isn't it? It's going to, it brings with it new opportunities too. It might not feel like it at the time, because that can be quite a difficult process. But
you're right,
actually,
it can be bruising. Yeah, but it is about learning what didn't go so well as what did go well, and being prepared for the next time. And for me, that's a really important essence of professional development.
Yeah. Activity providers, they might struggle sometimes to find strategies to look after themselves and for self-improvement. Do you have any advice or strategies that you'd recommend? Anything that's helped the staff, the many staff teams that you've supported, to develop or enhance their professional knowledge and skills?
I do, yes. I mean, for me, I sum this up with 3 C's, really, 3 words beginning with the C. The first is connecting, and certainly through an organisation as brilliant as NAPA, we have a fantastic opportunity to connect with each other as activity providers. And you know, these events this week is a great example of that. So connecting is really important, but also with others in your organisation, whether they work close by or whether they work a little bit further away. Second of my C's is collaborating. Really, really important word in the social care sector. We're seeing that mentioned and talked about much more as we work more closely with health colleagues. So collaborating, and I talk about this as learning from others as well as working with others. For example, I volunteer at my local library and I organise activities for young children, which is not something that comes into my professional work, but is such a valuable way for me to learn different techniques of supporting people with different behaviours, but different ideas. And I've found that such a useful way in terms of working with others to bring new ideas into my own work. And I also think it's really important to understand what's going on in the world of the people that you're supporting. So in that example, for me, it's what's going on in the world of schools, what's going on in the minds of the children, and actually thinking about how I can apply that to the work that we're doing. So collaboration is really, really important for me. And the third of my C's is actually one of my favourites, which is collecting ideas. I love collecting ideas from other people who've tried things that I may not have even thought about. We live in a world of fantastic resources, from the NAPA shed to the social media channels. There's more information available than we've ever had in the past. And collecting ideas, thinking about how you can adapt them in your own setting, I think just brings such richness to activity provision, and it makes sure that we keep moving forward rather than doing what we've always done.
Oh, the 3 C's. I love that. Thank
There
you for
you
that.
go.
You're a subject matter expert. You've got long experience and knowledge around learning and development. Can you share some of the challenges, maybe a challenge you've experienced in your own professional journey, and kind of how that shaped your commitment, really, your dedication?
I think for me, the biggest challenge, and I don't think this will be unusual for some of the people who are watching this today, is around technology. Throughout my career, the advancement of technology has been significant, but I also recognise the pace of change in technology is ever more rapid. And I was reflecting and thinking this was really highlighted for me during the COVID pandemic. We all had to adapt to technology. We all needed to use it as a way of staying connected. And that was fantastic. It was actually, ironically, a fantastic learning opportunity because we were all thrown in the deep end. We all learned together and some fantastic results came from that. But I did quickly realise that even as the pandemic progressed, that I needed to be able to stay interested in technology, even though it's not one of my natural passions, because the world wasn't going to go back to how it was before. And, examples are that I'm using different platforms all the time. Today is a new platform for me in terms of sharing. And it's important to not be frightened of it, so to embrace the confidence that we built up during the COVID pandemic, but also to try to be interested in what other people are using and what ideas there are out there, because it's a fantastic way to stay in touch with people, share information. And I do recognise that technology challenge has now become part of my professional development, and building my confidence is really important in that.
Yeah. And I think we've really seen, in terms of workforce development, haven't we, a real shift in people's expectations as well,
Yes.
around what learning means, really, which is great to see. But of course, everybody has to and are going at their own pace. So we have to take people with us on that journey. And I think, we have a real responsibility at NAPA, I think, to help people where they are and help them move forward in terms of this kind of newer, I wouldn't say new anymore, but newer kind of way of doing things. And we're all on that journey. I agree with you. I think, I was a trainer for many, many years, and it was real. Everything happened in a room, face to face, with a flip chart. And even when we introduced PowerPoint, it was that was a big deal.
Oh yes, I can remember.
From the OHP to the PowerPoint, that was
it was a bit
jump.
scary.
It was. But just in that 20 years, really, the difference, the advancement, as you say, has been so monumental. And I think what we need to be thinking about now is how do we enable people still to have that face-to-face contact too, because that's really important, isn't it? But actually, how can we also think about a digital approach to learning and development? And I think for activity providers, asking, if they're not sure, to ask, to say, this is something I'm learning, how can you help? And give them the permission, really, to say when they need some support with it, because I've had lots of support with it. Even this morning, preparing for this, I had to check in with the comms team and make sure I could share the bits and pieces I needed to share. We all need some support with things, don't we? As you say, those areas where we're weaker, and maybe the tech is one of those. Certainly was for me.
Yeah, and ultimately it's about building confidence. I mean, I can remember the days where you had an IT technician who would come along and do all the PowerPoint setup for you. Now it's about building confidence and trust in the platforms, and knowing what you'll do if they don't work, but building confidence that they will work and that you can manage them. And that's professional development as well.
It certainly is, yeah. So we're launching, as part of this week, our Year of Belonging. Any thoughts on how organisations can encourage a culture of kind of togetherness when they're growing and they're learning? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think culture is such an important word. It's the way that we do things, and a culture of learning where learning is important is really, really significant. For me, I think it's about investing in activity provision and activity providers. And I suppose by investing, I do mean time. I do mean spotlight, and events such as this week are fantastic in terms of putting activity providers in the spotlight, but also budget, which is the thorny issue. Never enough budget, and we could always do for more, but it's about what we can do to promote that culture of learning. Because it does drive the satisfaction for the people who use our services, which is really important. But of course, demonstrating, and we can do that as activity providers, that the satisfaction of the people who use our services will drive business success. More people wanting to come and live in our care settings, more people wanting to come and use the care services actually contributes to business success. And so not being afraid to say, the budget that we put towards activity providers does contribute to the success of the business, I think is really important. And one way we can do that is to share stories. I'm absolutely passionate about practical way we can do that is share stories of success and satisfaction, and the living the dream stories is a fantastic example of where that's actually going to contribute to the satisfaction of people in the care settings. But also perhaps sharing the stories of what doesn't work so well, so that we don't make costly mistakes and repeat those. And I think if we share those stories, that is a significant part of development for activity providers, because it comes back to the collaboration theme. It is about working together. Wherever you are in the world, wherever you are in the country, you can work together. And again, using technology does make that a little bit easier.
Yeah. I'm pleased you've mentioned wherever we are in the world, because we have people obviously all over the world joining in with NAP Week and our partners NAP in the States. And we've got people coming to our live sessions, and we'll watch this later on in the evening when it's a more sensible time for them in the States. And I think you're right. I think what's so lovely about weeks such as this really is that global recognition of a profession really helps people think, well, what are activity directors or recreational therapists, as they're called in the States, what are they doing day in, day out to celebrate what they do and recognize that the profession, the workforce that are supporting activity and engagement in care homes. And this week is a great example of that. So for those of you watching who didn't realise, all of the webinars that are available on the NAP page for NAP US are also available to our NAPA supporters. So please head over and have a look there too, because that's a great example of that. So balancing work responsibilities and thinking about your own professional development, that in itself can be a challenge, can't it? Fitting it in. I know sometimes it can be hard to, when you're busy, to actually plan in professional development. Any strategies, any habits that you might want we might want to be thinking about that can help with that?
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head there, where you said planning it in. And that's an important thing that I've always talked to people in my teams about, or people I've worked with, is actually planning the time for professional development. in the calendar, because it's always the first thing to go. It's always on everybody's to-do list, but it slips off when we're really, really busy. But if you carve out a dedicated piece of time each week, each month, to invest in your professional development, that's a really good habit. I think my overarching theme is stay curious and love learning, which is where my passion comes from, and explore new ideas. But I also do put a slight warning on that in terms of maintaining the balance between work and professional development. As I said earlier, we've never had more information at our fingertips online and other resources.
Yeah.
And it's very easy, I find, to lose a couple of hours by going down what I call a rabbit hole, by getting interested in something. And of course, some of the platforms will feed us content and you can become very interested. So for me, I have had to introduce an element of discipline into my professional development, focus, really, for want of a better phrase. And I ask myself two questions when I'm investing in professional development. Why am I doing this? Research, looking at different content. Why am I doing this? Just keep that at the forefront of my mind. And how can I take away something that will be useful? Because that stops me going off into all sorts of lovely avenues that are not relevant to what I started out on. And it's okay to do that on a Sunday afternoon, but not necessarily during work time, because you do lose time very quickly. But it is about keeping that commitment through time whilst actually keeping a focus.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Actually, I was thinking I could take some of that advice myself. It's very easy to do, isn't it, to get pulled in?
It is.
And I think your Sunday afternoons are important as well, aren't they? So if you find yourself, is there a way of kind of setting an amount of time maybe in your busy schedule, whether that's your personal time or your professional time, just to make sure that you don't end up too immersed in absolutely down those rabbit holes. I like that. So this whole week is about growth. It's all about growth and connection. I'm just thinking about achievable goals, setting achievable goals for professional development, because again, we want to be ambitious, but how do we make sure that those goals are manageable?
I think that's a really good question, because particularly at the start of a calendar year, as we are now, it's really easy to set goals, but they're only going to be useful for our professional growth if they're realistic. And it's good to challenge ourselves, but we don't want to challenge ourselves so much that we fail in our own eyes. So I think about setting goals that align with the part of the business that I'm working with, but also give some growth for me. So, for example, at the moment, I've set myself a challenge of building 3 new contacts within the organisation I'm working with. 3 contacts I've not spoken to before, building my network that way within the next month or 6 weeks. So I've put a time scale on it and I've put a realistic number. And then beyond that, I would build on that and think about 3 contacts outside of my organisation within the next month. So keeping it realistic, particularly not getting swept along with New Year's resolution type goals, and trying to keep them achievable, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I think we've got some questions from the audience that I'd really like to so before we run out of time, I would like for us to look at some of these, if that's okay. So the first one is from Clive, and Clive says, how can I keep up to date on a budget? Courses and qualifications can be so expensive. And you're right, Clive. Any thoughts on that, Sue?
Absolutely right, Clive. There is something very daunting about the cost that can be associated with qualifications and some courses. My advice is to look at where there are funded opportunities. So here in the UK, we have a sector lead body, Skills for Care, and they operate a workforce development fund. So looking for opportunities like that, where there is some funding available. But also in terms of more generally your professional development on a budget, I think that's where the collaboration and the connection comes in, because we can learn so much from each other. It doesn't always have to be about qualifications that have a high cost. Those can be peppered throughout our career, and it's really important that they are. But there are some certificates, courses that can be funded. And of course, there is an absolute wealth of information from other people, organisations such as NAPA, that we really can tap into. And turning those into your professional development is really important, I think.
Yeah. And I think also recognizing what is professional development. So listening to this, for example, note that down in your CPD log, because you may well have learned something. I hope you have. So I think also it's not necessarily formal courses and qualifications that we learn from, is it? There's lots of different ways in which, and you reading an article or going to a conference, those things as well are just as important, aren't they?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
There's another one here. This one is from Asha. She says, I didn't really enjoy school. I don't really like training courses. Do you have any advice for activity providers who might need a more creative approach to learning? That's a good one.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we need to recognise, and we do recognise even in activity provision, but certainly in my world of learning and development, we recognise people learn in different ways. And very often the academic regime of school, it doesn't suit a lot of people.
No.
So I like the word creative approach to learning. I think that's absolutely brilliant phrase. And for me, it is about learning from each other, talking to people, listening to people, using the social media channels, using the resources in the NAPA shed, because there are fantastic stories there. I'm a great believer in the power of storytelling. And actually, if we find ways to learn through storytelling and things that people have done, I think that's a really powerful way to be more creative in our approach to learning.
I agree. And sometimes it might be, you learn what works by doing it, don't you? So you might sign up to a course and you think, oh, this is really interesting, but they're asking me to write, essays, and it doesn't quite work for you. Don't be put off learning because that format or that approach wasn't right for you. Look for alternatives, because there are so many different alternatives, aren't there, to look for? But shop around as well. Shop around.
Yeah, and talk to other people about what's worked for them. Particularly if they have a different outlook on life to you or the same outlook. Yeah, absolutely.
The next question, I think this might have to be our last one looking at the time, is from Bella. Bella says, I have just finished my NAPA level 3 qualification. Congratulations, Bella.
Yes.
I can't wait to progress into a leadership role. What do you both think makes a good leader?
I think in terms of, I mean, that's a great question in terms of professional development. And for me, the most important leadership behaviour you can demonstrate is to lead by example. So I come across so many people who complain about others in their team who haven't got their training up to date, or they're not at 100% compliance. And when I actually challenge them and say, but where's yours? Oh, well, I haven't made the time to do my own training and learning.
Yeah.
So I think leading by example would be my big piece of advice. Watching this webinar and then talking to others in your team about it is a great leadership example. Yeah. And as you move into a defined leadership role, you need to do that more and more to encourage others in your team to follow suit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that, which is don't be scared of making mistakes.
Yeah,
we all make them, but it is the learning from them. It's the reflective bit. It's that even if it's just a 5-minute debrief after, we'll be doing it at NAPA after that week.
Yeah.
Just, what went well, what were the things we might have done differently, what have we learned? And what have we learned, not just as a team, as an organisation, but individually, if there were things that we might want to reflect on too. But I think, don't be scared of making mistakes or owning up to mistakes either, because there's learning for an organisation and for your leader as well in that. So, I'd add that to that. Brilliant. Thank you, Sue. That was amazing. I could talk to you all day. That was really fantastic. Thank you. So as we've said, we have a week, jam-packed week for you all, which we're really looking forward to. We've also introduced a challenge for the week, which is a 10,000 steps a day challenge. So if you're feeling as I am, it's a little bit January, a reminder to get out and walk, and perhaps also help us raise a little bit of money for our Living the Dream Fund towards the next fund, which, as I said, will open in the spring. So thank you, Sue. Thanks for being here with us today. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for everybody who's joined us live and those who'll be catching up later. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.